Hello, welcome to the Weekly Review, a program of South Network, making sense of news and topics relevant to South Sudan and its diaspora. It's a program of South Network, and I'm the producer and host. My name is Roger Alfred Yoron Mudi. Today, the Weekly Review is looking into the protest, which, according to the group calling themselves nonviolent civil and political organizations, will take place on Monday, 30th of August, to demand for resignation of President Salva Kiir, First Vice President Riek Machar, and the Revitalized Transitional Government of National Unity. The August 20th communique by the People's Coalition for Civil Action, PCCA, the United Citizens for Change, UCC, the National People's Movement, NPM, and Red Card Movement, RCM, declared 30th of August as National Awakening Day. The Weekly Review made efforts this week to host on the program the leader of the United Citizens for Change, UCC, and also their spokesperson, but our efforts later turned to be unsuccessful for some reasons from the side of those leaders. The Weekly Review also reached out to Edward Riek, who signed the PCCA declaration on behalf of South Sudanese diaspora, but he was unable to join the show that was scheduled. Nonetheless, using available information today, the program will look into the Joint Communique that has called for the protest, the PCCA declaration, as well as other related issues, what the government has done so far regarding the planned protest and the stance of others who support or disagree with the call for protest. For example, you have the group calling itself Citizens for National Solidarity, and they issued a press release on August 6th titled Rebutting Calls for Civil Action by the People's Coalition for Civil Action. We will look also into what South Sudan laws say and what local, regional, and international organizations have said regarding the freedom of assembly in South Sudan. So number one, in the August 20th Joint Communique by the People's Coalition for Civil Action, the United Citizens for Change, National People's Movement, and the Red Card Movement, they said they are seriously concerned by the scale of political, security, humanitarian, and economic crisis resulting from leadership failure and violent political competition in the country since independence, and that they were convinced that the current political leadership in the country is unwilling and cannot manage this crisis. The communique demanded the immediate and unconditional release of former Governor Kwel Agwar, one of the signatories of the declaration by PCCA, who was arrested by the National Security early this month and still remains under detention. The group said they resolved to uphold the National Awakening Day to specifically demand the resignation of President Salva Kiir, First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar, and the Revitalized Transitional Government of National Unity. And also they called upon the people of South Sudan to come and embark on civil disobedience until their demands are duly met. The communique was signed by Rajab Mohandis for PCCA, Wal Deng, Attack, Mabur Gordon Matot, Tut for RCM, Wall Attack for UCC, and also Dr. Matur Gurjok Gak for NPM. That's the communique, and just a little bit of background to the People's Coalition for Civil Action. They came into existence about a month ago after they made a declaration saying, quote, "We have had enough of war, enough of corruption, enough of insecurity, enough of economic hardships, enough of public neglect and leadership failure," unquote. They said they want South Sudanese living at home and abroad to mobilize and make their voices heard. On August 6th, another group calling itself the Citizens for National Solidarity issued a press release titled Rebutting Calls for Civil Action by the People's Coalition for Civil Action. In the press release, the Citizens for National Solidarity said they are, quote, greatly concerned about the declaration made by the People's Coalition for Civil Action, calling for civil disobedience, which we believe can jeopardize peace implementation and cause panic among the people who are currently rebuilding their lives after the return of peace in the country, unquote. They appeal to the citizens and other actors to continue supporting the government in implementation of the peace agreement and provide development, unquote. Activist Michael Mading Akweth, James Mohandis Apugi, Nyamach Hoth Mai, and advocate Joma Mabur Marial signed a press release by the Citizens for National Solidarity. Now, let's look into what the government has done so far. On 27th this month, Radio Jungule 95 FM, a community radio station in Jungule State, Bor, was shut down by the National Security Service operatives, and 3 journalists, including the station's manager, were briefly detained, reportedly because it was suspected that they will broadcast the protest scheduled for August 30th. Also, Radio Tamaz reported that the military intelligence unit of the South Sudan People's Defense Forces arrested civil society activist Justin Victor Yuasa on Wednesday and Bishop Jackson Yamba Antipas on Thursday, both in Yei River County of Central Equatorial State. Damazi reported that the families of the two said security personnel accused them of being supporters of the People's Coalition for Civil Action. Jameh David Kolok, the chairperson of the South Sudan Civil Society Forum, called on authorities in Yei River County to release those arrested without delay. Quote, "It is a fundamental right of every South Sudanese citizen that they should be given their freedom to speech or association, and we learned of their arrest, and they have been detained longer than the period to be arranged in court. We continue to speak out for their release, and it is important that if there is any reason, they should be taken to court and released," unquote. That was David Jameh, who was quoted to have said that. Meanwhile, on Sunday, the police and the National Security Service displayed its armory and personnel in Juba, and the police has advised the public against the planned protest. The Deputy Inspector General of Police, Lieutenant General James Pew Yak, said security has been beefed up across the country. He said they are not going to harm anybody, but to advise people to go on with their normal lives. They don't want any disruption. Today, also, the Voice of America reported South Sudan Police Service spokesperson Major General Daniel Justin as saying the planned protest will cause public disorder and that they will not be tolerated by the authorities. He invited the protest organizers to meet with police. You have to coordinate with the police to give you protection, and these people, we invite them to come such that we sit and arrange, he told the VOA. In the same report, Abraham Awolich, a member of the group, said it notified the police by a letter of the planned protest, but added that such notification is not required. Quote, "The people of South Sudan are coming out on the 30th to protest. It is their constitutional right," he told the Voice of America. "You don't need approval from anyone to exercise that power. You cannot seek the same state which has aggrieved you to give you permission to protest against it." That's what he added. In conclusion, now let's look at what South Sudan laws say, as well as what local, regional, and international organizations have said regarding the freedom of assembly in South Sudan. Article 25, Subarticle 1 of the Transitional Constitution of South Sudan says the right to peaceful assembly is recognized and guaranteed. It does not say that the exercise of that right is subject to a provision of other legislation. And also, South Sudan Code of Criminal Procedure Act 2008 under Section 158 says the right to peaceful assembly is recognized and guaranteed in South Sudan. In this regard, every person shall have the right to freedom of assembly, freedom of association with others. Two, notwithstanding the generality of subsection 1, certain types of assemblies which pose a threat to the safety and soundness of South Sudan, the government institutions, state institutions, and public welfare are deemed to be unlawful assemblies and subject to the provisions of that chapter. And 159 says unlawful assemblies may be designated as unlawful assembly if the common object of the person composing that assembly is one or more of the following: A, to overthrow by force or show of force the government or any government or state institution or any public servant in the exercise of his or her lawful powers. B, to resist the execution of any law or any legal process. C, to commit any mischief or criminal trespass or any other offense. D, by means of force or show of force to enforce a right or support right. E, by means of force or show of force to compel any person to do what he or she is not legally bound to do, is not legally supposed to do. F, but any assembly which is without a permit required by local or regulation, or which fails to comply with the conditions set forth in such permit. Or G, any assembly which, having been prohibited by the local authority, the Public Prosecution Authority, magistrate, or court on the recommendation of the Chief Inspector of Police takes place. But at the same time, the Constitution, which is supreme to any legislation, in Article 155 says the mission of the South Sudan Police, among others, is to A, prevent, combat, and investigate crime, maintain law and public order, protect the people and their properties, and D, and uphold and enforce this constitution and law. And one of the sabbaticals there says the police of South Sudan shall be governed by this constitution and the law. It shall respect the will of the people, the rule of law and order, civilian authority, democracy, human rights, fundamental freedoms, and execute judicial orders. Finally, South Sudan and the right to freedom of assembly regarding regional and international organizations that have talked. In their joint submission to the United Nations Universal Periodic Review 40th session of the UPR Working Group on South Sudan, scheduled for January 2022, the East African and Horn of Africa Human Rights Defenders Project Defend Defenders and South Sudan Human Rights Defenders Network made the following submissions regarding freedom of peaceful assembly in South Sudan. That, according to a 2019 report published by Freedom House, protests rarely occur in the current conditions of conflict, displacement, and hunger. Therefore, South Sudan's commitment to the right to freedom of peaceful assembly under the Constitution has not been fully tested, and that in the few instances of protests that did occur, authorities restricted freedom of peaceful assembly by threatening and arresting protesters and violently dispersing demonstrations. Defend Defenders and South Sudan Human Rights Defenders Network have recommended that the South Sudan government meaningfully implement the recommendations it accepted in relation to civic space during its second UPR, and also send clear instruction to all security forces and agents to refrain from using excessive and lethal force while dispersing protest. That force may only be used when strictly necessary and in a proportionate manner in line with the basic principles on the use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials and the principles for the proper management of assemblies as per the joint report of the Special Rapporteur on the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and of association and the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary executions. And that South Sudan government should initiate swift, thorough, transparent, and effective investigations into all instances of illegal detained activists and civil society actors. On the freedom of peaceful assembly in South Sudan, Article 19 also, Article 19 East Africa and Free Press Unlimited have made almost similar observations and recommendations, and also called on all UN member states to meaningfully and effectively engage South Sudan, engage with government of South Sudan at the 40th session of the UPR working group in January 2022, unquote. Well, this is what we have for you for the weekly review regarding the topic and related issues. And my name is Roger Alfred Yoron Mudi. I'm the producer and the host. We shall keep you updated on any development that's happening regarding the protests and other issues of importance in the country.